evening. Welcome to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. We are here tonight to do our weekly Good, Bad, and the Ugly show to talk about lots of ugly and lots of bad from the loss to the Cleveland Browns in week 12. Zach brought it up before the show. Normally, we would be recapping the previous game on Monday night, but we did that last week because we had an awful Thursday night game. And we are now in, as Zach put it, the longest Steelers week of the season. That meme with the lady from Titanic where it's like, it's been 84 years. That's how we're all going to feel by the time we finally get like through Thanksgiving, through the Thanksgiving games, all of our turkey eating and leftovers, and then finally get to next Sunday when we get to play the Cincinnati Bengals. So now that you guys have we did our show on Friday, just like less than 24 hours out from how we, experienced that awful loss in the Snow Bowl against the Browns up in Cleveland. How are you guys feeling now that you've had a chance to like fully digest that loss? Zach, your ego, go first. Go ahead and go first.
Well, mainly it's because in a second I got to help my wife carry some stuff out to the car, so I want to make sure I jump in first. And I'll cover this a little bit. My hope is that what we just saw is what I feel is necessary for championship teams to get where they are, which is a punch in the face and a reality check, and this isn't who we are. I've seen enough this season that I believe that, and we'll get into it in my good, bad, and the uglies later. But That's why I'm able to smile even a little bit this week. So
okay,
that's how I feel about it.
Fair enough. Bob, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the sky is not falling after watching the Chiefs get. The Chiefs are just bad. So if that's what we're up against is the number one seed, I want to see it on Christmas Day. But I mean, flatly, if they play like they have, and if they play like they did against Carolina yesterday, then we have a really good chance to beat the Chiefs. The problem is I think the AFC is going to go through Buffalo, and I'm not so sure about Buffalo. But after nearly a decade of not seeing us win a playoff game, I feel like the division's realistic. I feel like a division round playoff game is realistic. And if we end up in the wild card, I think a playoff victory is realistic. If we somehow got the number one seed, which after this loss, I don't think is likely, but if we somehow did, and then we lost a close divisional game, our division round game at home, then okay, maybe I could see giving kind of a pass for the season. But bottom line is we need a playoff win. It's been a long time. I think this is the team that could do it. And the rest of the AFC is basically trash if it ain't Buffalo.
Fair. What about you, Dave?
I wasn't as down on the loss as a lot of people. I think the NFL really screwed the Steelers, putting them on a Thursday night game after a Baltimore game. It's a lot to ask to go on the road after a physical, emotional game against the Ravens. Then you throw in the snow and everything else. That was so predictable for a hiccup. It wasn't even funny. So sure, it was disappointing. They did some things. You have a lead in the fourth quarter. You want to finish it off and take it home, but shit happens. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in. You play Baltimore, you play your heart out, then you got to go on the road in 3 days. Half the team didn't even practice. If you look at the practice report, they gave TJ, Cam, Minka all just rest days. They didn't even practice. So it is what it is. You move on.
That's a tough one. I don't know how you handle that. I listened to Kim Hayward talk about it on his podcast, and I think Christian Kuntz talked about it on his show that, it's so hard because like the guys that, not Christian Kuntz, the guys who get really like hit hard a lot during the game are so sore that your body is just starting to recover by Thursday. Yes. And now, when you would normally be getting into the swing of getting ready for this next game, you're already at the next game. And so I don't know what the answer is for something like that when the NFL screws you, but we're going to be facing it again when we play the Ravens and the Chiefs, with the two Christmas time games with only the 4 days between them. I don't know how any team, it makes it like I swore this year, I swore after last season I wasn't going to do the Steelers conspiracy shit anymore, but I don't do it. When you look at the schedule and you see something like this, like it just feels like there's somebody out there that's out to get us. So I will say this about the Browns loss. I was upset and disappointed, but there's a part of me that kind of expected it. And I listened to Mark Cabali, who I think is like the most negative Steelers insider out there. He's so pessimistic. And he said, I'm not worried. He said, I'll talk to me after the Bengals game. Like, we need to win this game. Do you know what I mean? He said, he felt like all those things, like the coming off the Ravens. He said, you say what you want. The Browns played in the same weather. The weather's a factor. He said there was some bad choices made. And I think all of those things converged to just make this loss that shouldn't have happened, And I heard some other people, and I kind of thought, well, we battled back. I said this on Friday. I felt like we battled back, and we should have won that game. And so it's, it's unfortunate when you get close like that and it just falls apart, at the very end like it did. So we're here to talk about our good, bad, and ugly from the Steelers and Browns game. And man, I'd love to mix it up a little tonight and start with bad and ugly and save the good for last, because we need some good vibes heading into this Bengals game. I think we need to put some good out into the universe. So let's start with our bads tonight. Bob, do you want to go first?
The bad was tackling. David brought this up last week in the recap show. The tackling was really, really bad. I went back and watched it, and I saw Queen go for a big hit on Tillman instead of wrapping him up. It allowed him to fall forward for a first down, or close to a first down, and they picked it up on fourth down. And just in general, they had Jameis a couple times, and they didn't wrap him and bring him down. And on fourth down, down near the goal line, on ultimately what became the winning drive, they had the drive stopped. All they got to do is tackle Jameis, and they had a shot at him, and the game's over. Then we take the ball, we take a knee, and we're out of there. So overall, and especially because the defense had such a huge effort against Baltimore, I think we gave some of it back because it was a bad plan and bad tackling during the game. I mean, I'm reminded of the old John McKay.
Well, we didn't block, so we made up for it by not tackling.
And I know somebody else will probably talk about the offensive line, but yeah, the tackling was really bad.
Yeah. Hey, Zach, I said that I felt like we needed to put some good out into the universe. So we're going to save the good for last, and we started with bad tonight.
I like that.
Just so you know, we didn't speed through the other choice.
Yeah. He's like, I missed the whole thing.
Yeah, I jumped in. I was like, 7 minutes. It wasn't that bad of a game.
What about you, Dave? What was your bad?
My bad is TJ Watt. This is a game where the Steelers really needed him. They needed their superstar outside linebacker to make a play or two, and he was largely invisible in this game. I'm not sure. We talk a lot about the people chipping him and triple teaming him and this and that. He still needs to make plays, and in this game in particular, coming off the 3 days less, like we talked about, short week, this and that. We needed TJ Watt to make a play, and he was just not there. He's on pace for 11 and a half sacks this year. That's his lowest total in his career that when we played a full season.
Yeah.
Now
there's something more to this than just they're focusing more on him. I don't know if he's playing injured or what the case is, but it's not the same TJ Watt that we're used to, and particularly against this Browns team who gives up the most sacks in the league.
Yeah.
By a good margin.
There was something put out today on Twitter that, you're right. And it's not just TJ. Across the league, TJ is still apparently one of the people leading for the Defensive Player of the Year, according to betting odds. And everyone's saying it's because of the injuries happening to people who would have had it this time. Aiden Hutchinson. People who were surging aren't playing anymore. And because of that, guys who are having down years are in it. So I'm not saying TJ is not having a down year. I'm saying it seems to be like an NFL-wide thing about the guys that are in the lead right now are having lower years.
Well, they talk about it like the sacks have something to do with it. And clearly after last year, we all know that's not the determining factor. You know what I mean? So
I was going to say it would be ironic if he won it this year on a down year and he didn't win it last year when he had one of his best years,
Right. That would be on brand. Somebody said today that they felt like, I think it was Kabali this morning, maybe Fittipaldo. I listened to a lot of radio today. that, they really believe that the Steelers have to start moving Watt around more. They don't understand why they don't do that. You know what I mean? They talked about, even like when Cam Hayward was younger, if he felt he had a more favorable matchup, he moved the interior guys around to get himself a, more favorable matchup where he could influence the game. And they felt like the Steelers should be moving TJ around more than they do. They talked about how, Myles Garrett doesn't play the same position, but the Browns move him around. Do you think that if they move TJ around, it would be more impactful?
You know what's funny? I heard somebody, and I wish I could remember who it was, that said TJ's a one-trick pony, but he's elite at it, and you can't move him to the other side or around in the middle. That he's not comfortable, and he becomes a lot less effective.
He said that he doesn't. Part of it is that TJ doesn't want to move. Do you know what I mean? So I think it was like Adam Crowley was asking him, and I think it was Kabbalah, and he said, he doesn't want to move. This came up his rookie year, and they had him on the other side, and he didn't want to do it. And he didn't say he threw a fit, but he threw a fit, and they switched him with Bud Dupree, and then TJ started to go off. Do you know what I mean? So that does kind of lend credence to like the one-trick pony.
I mean, he's great at it. But.
Hold on there, because that ignores the fact that James Harrison was the one who identified that TJ was much better on the other side, and that led to the switch. As Harrison told the linebackers coach, "Hey, you got to play him on the other side because he's great on the other side. He's just okay over here."
Yeah.
Harrison's detriment.
I know that's the story. I'm just reporting, just saying what Kabbalah said. He said that TJ Watt wanted it.
That's what James Harrison said on the Roethlisberger podcast last year.
Now, what are the stats as far as, because I know we see TJ up close and personal. I wonder what the stats are for other pass rushers that do it from the other side. Because I remember 3 specific snaps that Myles Garrett took on the other side, and they were ineffective. I mean, he was there, but
he got one of his sacks from the other side, though, didn't he? He did a stunt inside and ended up getting a sack.
It was a stunt, and Zach Frazier missed him. Broderick Jones didn't miss him. We don't use TJ in a lot of stunts for some reason.
And how much of that was really like, look, I'm not taking away from Myles Garrett, like whatever. The guy's a good athlete. I'm not taking away. It's not a diss on him, but our offensive line, and I'm sure somebody will be talking about them, played pretty shitty. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, how much of that is the fact that, Dan Moore didn't play him as well as he usually does. Zach Frazier had some struggles. So, Zach, what was your ugly? Bad. I'm sorry, bad. What was your bad?
My bad is, despite the 3 days, just a lack of preparation. No one looked ready. We were talking about the more tape I watch, the more convinced that people are simply enjoying the fact that Garrett outperformed Watt for some reason. And someone threw out that, Garrett was double teamed just as much as TJ or Chip, just as much.
They were half-assed double teams, right?
I vehemently disagree with that. Number one, so I can use the word vehemently. Number two, there's no way you can compare the way the two were done. And I don't blame that on the Browns. I blame that on us. We apparently came in and looked at the only person on the Browns defense that had the ability to beat us and said, we're not going to be ready to play you, no matter who was. So lack of prep, the defense looked like they didn't know what was doing. Everything that had haunted us for the last couple of years came back in one game at the worst time. So that lack of prep, and I put that on Mike Tomlin. I put that on the secondary coaches. I put that on Zach Azzanni. Every single coach I put on, because the players can only do so much. And when you're only given one T-shirt and shorts practice during the week, the coaches have to do a little more. And that wasn't there.
I'll build off Zach with my bad, because my bad really went back to coaching, and I don't want to put it all on Tomlin. I think there was some questionable decisions made, things I didn't really understand. I also believe strongly that hindsight is 20/20, because if Boz had made that 58-yard field goal, you know what I mean? Not one of us would have been given it a second thought. I don't think anybody would have even been out there talking about how remarkable it was, because it's what we expect Boz to do. But because he missed it, it became a focal point. There was that bizarre 4th down decision to go for it when you could have punted and put him deep. I didn't really understand that. There were some things like that, but I also thought there was some really questionable stuff coming from Arthur Smith, who I feel like he has a lot more at his disposal as far as personnel packages go than we've seen, Canada have, or even Fichtner have. You know what I mean? He's got all these options. And then who the hell are you scaring with the bizarre combinations you're putting out there? Connor Hayward and Michael Pruitt and Cordarrelle Patterson, who's clearly still injured. And you're putting those guys out there and you're watching Hayward. He looks confused. The offense looked confused. We ran those packages with Justin Fields. They didn't make any sense. We were supposed to be confusing the Browns. We were confusing ourselves. I mean, it was really just confusing. I didn't understand. I said when we used Justin Fields in the last game against the Ravens that we were going to have to get him involved in some passing. You couldn't just use him to run, because otherwise every time he comes on the field, the defense is going to be like, oh, yeah, they're going to run Justin Fields. He's out here. That's all they do with him. So you would have to use him for some passing. But why, when you're in like a critical third down situation, would you choose to use him when you have somebody else in Russell Wilson who's been doing well all night in passing? It was just stuff like that to me that just didn't make any sense. And I try not to engage in a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking because I think it's pointless. But I thought this game, more than any recently, had some really strange, questionable coaching decisions. I don't know if they were trying to get too cute because they were so busy worried about breaking the stigma of winning this game, or what it was. So let's switch over and talk a little bit about our uglies. What were your guys' uglies? Dave, start with you.
Well, I couldn't complain about the wide receivers this week because Calvin Austin went off. So I'll pick on the offensive line this week. The offensive line was horrendous. The pass blocking, even the run blocking. Zach Frazier, I think, probably had his worst game as a starter. Dan Moore is Dan Moore. He got abused in this game. I was looking at the PFF scores. Dan Moore, 58. Isaac Seumalo, 57. Zach Frazier, 61. Mason McCormick, 50. And Broderick Jones, 69, the highest.
Which is wild because it is the game where Dan Moore usually stands out. Like, this is usually against the Browns. That's the game where everybody goes, oh, he's not so bad.
To piggyback on your point, Leanne, I think Jim Schwartz outcoached Arthur Smith in big time. And the offensive line was confused and struggled. And to Zach's point, the double teams on our side were pathetic. Pat Freiermuth is not a blocker, period. And if you're using him to help, you're wasting your time. You might as well just not have anybody. And even some of the backs, Najee Harris, I was watching some of the All-22, his attempts at helping out and chipping weren't exactly wholehearted. So I'm picking on the line, but they had help from the coaching, and to be a disaster that they were. But
yeah,
all the way around, it was just
some comments about the coaching. John felt that there was questionable play calling is kind of Smith's calling card. I don't know that I necessarily think that he's got like this long history of questionable play calling, but I definitely think that was the case in this game. I know that other people aren't thrilled with him. And John also thinks that the players can't overcome Tomlin's bad clock management and decisions. And I think that was definitely showcased in this game. I don't know that I always think Tomlin's clock management is bad. I'm not as negative as some are, but this game was strange.
He's got a little bit of a history of strange decisions with.
He does.
I mean, he went into the first half with a timeout in his pocket. He didn't
that
use
floating
it.
timeout.
I mean,
I don't.
But usually he wastes them on something random, like early in the first quarter. And you're like, why the hell are we taking a timeout now?
I tweet every week, the Steelers hate timeouts. They just burn them as fast as they can.
Yeah, we don't want those. Give those away.
Look at it. Bottom line is, real quick, a trend is a trend is a trend. When you play on Thursday night, you have to sort of prepare a little bit going into the weekend so that when you come out on Monday knowing that, hey, we got to have a plan and be ready, you don't just start that on Sunday night after the game. There's some pre-planning going on, or, okay, what do we think we're going to do? We're not going to shift our focus too much, but we got to have a little bit of a plan and have something in mind going in. And the Steelers' bottom line are 1-8. The only team we have ever beaten on a Thursday, and this was a night game. I thought it was a day game, and I looked it up today. It was a night game. Was Scott Tolzien and Pat McAfee playing quarterback for the Colts in 2016. We're 0-8 otherwise. Now, does that mean that he's universally a bad coach and unprepared? No. It just means that on a quick turnaround time where you have virtually no practice and you just have to communicate what your plan is, he's not good at it. He's just not. Some guys are not good at other things. Tomlin's not good on Thursday night. Luckily, no playoff games get played on Thursday night.
But to your point, though, I mean, that makes that point even drives it home is how good he is on Monday nights where you have extra preparation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, with
He's
much
good
as
on,
he might struggle
he's good
with
on the bye week too, but on short prep, he's not. That doesn't. And I almost wondered if you need extra to be great, which is, Bill Belichick was almost impossible to beat if you gave him extra prep time. If you're great with extra, but not good on short, maybe this whole I'm a great communicator thing isn't what we think it is. Either that or what we all know to be true. He is not a good X's and O's coach. He needs X's and O's people around him.
I'd define it differently. I'd say it's not that he isn't a good communicator. It's not like Tomlin's not a good delegator. And I think that comes out especially more here because if you have only 3 days to do and you're trying to control everything and you don't have extra days, maybe for another coach to find a way to come up and say, listen, we need to back off of it. Pick your battles with Mike Tomlin, I'm guessing, is a lot of things that the assistant coaches have to go through. So in this particular thing, he's probably communicating fine. It's just a lot in 3 days that he wants to do that. So that's how I see it. It's the delegation issue that probably comes in.
What was your ugly, Zach?
My ugly was anybody. I don't care if it was down to the person doing the towels. If you were involved in creating this offense this week, you need to be held accountable. And it wasn't just the play calling, the personnel on the field. If I brought any of my siblings, any of them, they are not experts in football, but they have played it and come in and I'm saying, look at this. Here's what's going on. What do you think the play call is going to be? They would be able to tell you if we're going to run a run or a pass. we had one of them. The only receiver we had in the field was Skronik. What are we going to do on that play? It's tone deaf, and I hate that word because I haven't used it since last year, and I have used it so many times defining this game because it's like what they want to happen and what is actually happening and what they do after are three completely disconnected things. It's disconcerting. That's why I'm really hoping it's an aberration because there was nothing good about the way this offense was put together, the way it executed, nothing. So awful. That was my ugly.
You don't like Cordell Patterson as the go-to guy for the 2-point conversion with the game on line? That didn't do anything for you?
Right. Unbelievable. Like, unbelievable. And look, there's some stuff you do like that is like, ooh, creative. Do you know what I mean? And caught people off guard, but like, that wasn't it. It was like we took something that could have been creative and picked, it was like opposite day, the worst possible person to stick in
actually,
there.
That's why my ugly was going to be Russell Wilson holding on the football, but in my head, I'm like, he's already has had issues with that apparently, and everything that is bad was exacerbated in this game. So I'm not going to take something that was already bad that just happened to be worse in this game. I needed something that was normally good, and this time specifically wasn't.
Look, David, don't be chiming in from the cheap seats. You didn't want to be in here giving your good, bad, and ugly. You can't be Monday morning quarterbacking from your comfort of your living room.
At least he's not complimenting himself. He could be doing that from the chat.
He does
Is it a coincidence that he had a bad week picking and now he didn't want to be on the show today? I don't know. Conspiracy theory.
Shots fired. Oh, yeah.
Well, my ugly this week was special teams. And look, I know it has to be really tough to be playing special teams in the snow and the cold and all of that. So I don't want to take anything away from how hard that is. But there was some really miserable stuff. And let's just forget Boz's kicks. Like, I think that's, the weather is the great equalizer and things like that. And so, you had Corliss Waitman's punt, but then on top of that, you had KZ's 15-yard penalty. And I mean, it just wasn't a good special teams day for us. There's a lot of miscues. And I just think that those things in a game of inches, where you're trying so hard to fight back for a win, you can't afford to have silly stuff like that happen. And it was a shame because I think Waitman's been a solid asset so far since he came in for Johnston earlier this season. And man, that was definitely not his game. So hopefully he does some wet weather work sometime soon. Bob, what about you?
I could chalk this up to the whole post game from the Pickens fight and on, but there was something that really bugged me. Tomlin was asked after the game about the penalty and the intentional grounding. Why did you accept it? Why did you not decline it? And blah, blah, blah. And his thing was initially when they thought it was grounding, he was declining it no matter what. And that was true because the Browns came out and sort of lined up. But then when they started to talk about it and there was some thought of, okay, they're going to call grounding, and they pulled out that bullshit intentional touching. And Dave and I were talking about this in prep. I was like, okay, so now if I'm a quarterback and I drop back and I want to ground the ball, all I got to do is drill it into the offensive lineman's back. Intentional touching. There's no such thing as intentional grounding if I hit the offensive lineman.
Stereotype said that he checked in as an eligible receiver, though, and that was the reason why.
But if he's eligible, then it's not illegal touching him, right?
Grounding.
Yeah, if he's eligible, it's not illegal touching.
Well, and that's what I thought. That's what confused me. Do you know what I mean? He indicated he felt it was a good call, although a bad call in general, the way they made it was correct. But to me, it didn't make a lot of sense.
Well, the thing that bugged me when he was trying to explain it, and this kind of gets into the whole, what the hell was everybody thinking on Thursday night? It was from top to bottom. It wasn't just him.
Right.
But for him to sit there and say, well, I was going to decline it. You were going to decline the 4th and 7 instead of 4th and 2 when you thought it was grounding? Like, oh, yeah, I was going to decline it either way. But then he ended up accepting it when they explained it to him. So I hated that explanation. It's like, okay, wait a minute. So you thought it was intentional grounding, but you were going to decline it. But when they changed it to illegal touching and you got 3rd down over again, you were going to accept it? Come on, just be honest. Just say, hey, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought that I would rather play for 4th and 2. That whole thing bugged me. I mean, you got Pickens getting in fights. You got the coach not understanding what the call on the field was. You got Arthur Smith doing God knows what. And for the whole, hey, he didn't have a history. He didn't have a history in Tennessee. But those Atlanta Falcons fans will tell you that he had a questionable history with some play calls. The sky's not falling, but this was an ugly loss. It's just there's not a lot of lipstick you can put on a pig and make it not be a pig. This was a pig. Luckily, we still have 6 games to go, and we could still turn it around.
We are 8-3.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But we kind of gave away the number 1 seed because, I mean, who knows how lucky Kansas City's going to keep getting. Hopefully when they come play us, that we'll kind of expose them to the world a little bit like Buffalo did. But I don't think Buffalo's going to lose more than a game.
I agree.
What I'd like to know is if anybody in the chat does it, and we can put it up as a poll, because Bob brought it up, and we're in different places about this, but I want to know how many people at any point in this season saw the Steelers as legitimate number 1 seed possible. Because I don't know why, even though I said contenders, for me, I have not once seen us entering the playoffs as the number 1 seed. So that just surprised me because I'm curious if I'm on the outside for that. So
if you're 9-2 after Thursday,
that nobody thought we were going to do anything. We were going to lose the AFC. We were going to miss the playoffs. This was going to be Tomlin's first losing season. Hold on to your britches, Steelers fans. Then all of a sudden it was like, oh, maybe this team isn't so bad. Then all of a sudden we're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Then we lose a game and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh shit, they aren't going to win the AFC now. And I was like, wait a minute, why were we winning the AFC? Like I thought we were legitimate Super Bowl contenders before the game. That doesn't mean you have to win the AFC. That just means you have to be willing or able to win playoff games.
I don't trust.
It's a lot easier to win as a number 1 seed.
Sure, it is, but I mean, I don't know that I think most of us felt that was it.
I
My
mean,
heart's
to
been
Bob's
broken
point.
by a lot of top seed Steeler teams. I do not trust top seeded.
Well,
Steeler
that's true
teams.
too.
Give me a
That's a
5
good
and
point.
6. Give me a 5.
That's a
No,
good
honestly,
point. Yeah.
think about every
Yeah.
time at home, number 1 seed, number 2 seed.
Cowher was
Heart's
famous for that,
broken.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give me those wild cards where we got to prove that we got that medal. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I mean, to Bob's point, if they're 9-2 after last week, they could legitimately think about number 1 seed.
It's
mean,
that's the rewarding bad behavior. We deserved to lose that game.
Well,
we needed to
well,
learn.
A lot of
this.
teams.
I-
Like the
Zach,
Chiefs have a whole
Cincinnati's
season as that.
10-1.
I was going to say
Well,
that's been
and they're going to
every
eventually
year.
they will pay for this. If
Maybe.
their loss that
Maybe.
legitimately matters happens in the first round of the playoffs and ours doesn't, I'll take that Cleveland loss every single day of the year.
Sure.
So that's how I feel about it.
I agree with John here. I do think that this is happening on both sides of the ball. I think that they're adjusting and we're not. And I think we did see some adjustments earlier from Russell Wilson. Then I don't know, whatever happened with this Browns game, it just felt the same. He said also that his eyes tell him they aren't a tier 1 team because of all we previously discussed. But
I can't tell
Coyotes,
that's
There's
either my
does mean
that's
things.
either my
to
brother or
Coyotes.
my dad. I don't know
well,
who that is.
there's
What-
only
what-
one
what-
tier
what-
one.
the two?
Target.
There's only one tier 1 team in the AFC, and that's Buffalo. And Buffalo is not it's not a perfect team, but everybody else in the AFC is beatable. If you play Buffalo in Buffalo, I don't think you have a chance this year.
I'd
But
argue
if
there's no tier 1 AFC and team in the AFC. The 2 tier 1 teams are in the NFC, Philly and Detroit.
I agree with that.
They're so far ahead of the AFC and what we have to offer.
I agree
think
with
that-
that.
Oh, that's
I
Philly.
think
mean-
either one of those teams go to Buffalo in the snow in December. They're going to have
Philly,
a hard
But you
time
play them in
winning.
the Super Bowl, I take Detroit.
Saquon.
Oh, yeah,
I
and
can
that's
see Saquon
different.
in snow.
Yeah.
I can see Saquon in snow.
I will say
I
that
can
I've
see him
always
doing
been a
that.
fan of the Steelers being the underdog. Do you know what I mean? There's been plenty of seasons, we just do better when people don't believe in us. So
I prefer it.
We
Yeah.
play Philly in a few weeks. We'll find out.
we'll
The last
Next
find
year
time,
we're in.
well, hold on. The
And
last
Kansas
time
City, too.
Last time we
Yeah.
went to a Super Bowl, we were a 2 seed. Last time we
Wait.
won a Super Bowl, we were a division winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice story
Division
when we
winner, I'll
won
take.
as the wild card in 2005 in
Wow.
that year. But we were a 15-1 team that went to 10-6, and arguably we were a better team than the 15-1 team by the time the season ended. So, we haven't been a number 1 seed since 2004. It's been 20 years. I kind of want to see what it looks like when we're the number 1 seed.
I wouldn't
again.
mind seeing it either, to be honest.
And
Yeah.
all those Tomlin number
A
1
bye? A
ended
bye
in
would be
the
great.
championship games.
We just got done saying Mike Tomlin's great with extra time to think. Give him 2
Give,
weeks.
give him 2 weeks. He's
Lock
great off
it
the
in.
bye. He
Lock
is
it in.
great
I'll
off
take
the
a bye
bye.
week.
Imagine the
Look.
magic he could work. All right, let's talk about our goods. Bob, start us out. Say something positive. Don't twist
I
it
thought-
into something negative.
I thought Pat Fryermuth was the good in the game. He discovered a little something, and he was a go-to guy in the second half. He had a big catch on a 3rd down where he's coming back and the snow was in his eyes. But bottom line is that, from an offensive perspective, 4 catches for 59 yards is probably not what any of us was thinking what Pat Fryermuth's season would look like. But if they build on this going towards the end of the year, because Calvin Austin, nice story. I don't think that's going to happen every week. Van Jefferson is a no-show. Mike Williams is a no-show. We need Pat. And I thought on Thursday he gave us that little glimpse of what can happen if you look to Pat against a defense. And he had his best game last year against the Bengals. Guess who we play on Sunday?
Mhm. What about you, Dave?
Brace yourself, guys. I picked a wide receiver, and it's not George Pickens. Calvin Austin, you got to give it up. That catch for the touchdown
Yeah.
was legit. Like, that's his best catch in a Steelers uniform. That was phenomenal. And if Russell Wilson leads him on that throw, he's got 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
The big 35, 40 yard that he had.
Yeah.
It's encouraging. Well, we need somebody else to step up. Someone finally did. Hopefully he can carry this momentum into the Bengals game and continue, because they desperately, I beat this dead horse enough. They desperately need another wide receiver to step up on his team. And this week, Calvin Austin did it. So that's my good for sure.
What about you, Zach?
I like that. My good has very little to do with this game and has to do with the fact that the rest of the season showed me that I should not get too invested in the result of this one. I'm choosing to believe that the previous 10 games showed me who this team really was, and that the rest of the games afterwards will continue to. So my good is that the Steelers gave me enough confidence to withstand this loss. That's my good.
Okay, I'll take it.
I had
David
to
doing
dig
the
this
hard
week.
work since Relic's not here tonight, saying that Austin is tied with Moose with 354 yards, leads the receivers in touchdowns with 3. Thank you for looking that up in between bites of dinner.
We talked about this on our picks podcast. Who do you think ends up with more receiving yards, Austin
that
or
is
Moose?
my dad. That's my dad. Hey, what's up, Wayne? I was trying to figure out if that was my dad or not. Please,
Is your
lifelong
dad a
Cleveland
Browns
Browns. Lifelong.
Oh, I know.
He's not allowed to comment on the
Years
thing.
ago.
He's a Browns fan, especially coming off a loss to the Browns. We can't even let him. How did he even get in? Who's
Sir, you were on
screening
the
these people?
wrong show. Who gave you the password?
I got him. The very first day I met him, that's what he opened with, and he has proved me wrong about everything I thought of a Browns fan since. Now, 2 very difficult game days a year, but remarkable human being. So
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. Well, at least he raised you right. We'll give him credit for that.
well, no, biological dad raised me, but I love him just as much. Both dads. I love both dads.
I love that.
All
You're
the
lucky
dads.
to have that many awesome dads in your life.
I know,
Well,
right?
My good this week. Look, it's a tough week to pick goods. Do you know what I mean? You're looking at a few options, but I will say that I felt at the end of all of it, the quarterbacks really weren't the worst part of this game. Like, I recognize that there were some things that went wrong, but I thought they were more things that were done to them or decisions they were given rather than the choices they made. I felt like Wilson had a solid game. He should have been the one. I know he took a sack, but he should have been the one in there throwing that 3rd-yard pass. That wasn't on him. I feel like Fields is showing us, the potential for what we could do with him if we do it correctly, but we can't be creating like confusing offensive line configurations and then throwing Fields out there where nobody understands what's going on. So I felt like the quarterbacks all in all continue to show us that we have like something really special with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. If we can just figure out, or Arthur Smith can just figure out how to make that work. We have something that no other team in the NFL has, and we can really leverage that heading into these last difficult games where we force teams like Kansas City and the Eagles to have to prepare for 2 really solid quarterbacks who are very different guys. And this isn't preparing for, Kenny Pickett in case Jalen Hurts gets injured. This is like serious preparation, knowing you're likely going to see these guys. And so I think it's something really special. I think that really was apparent to me this week, and we just have to figure out how to make that really, really work. So that was my good.
Point.
I like having
let's be the one team that can actually beat that trope that everyone says if you have 2 quarterbacks, if no quarterbacks, unless you're Pittsburgh. I want that asterisk to be at the end.
Because I actually think that, I think that these guys want to win. Do you know what I mean? And I think, honestly, the best thing for Justin Fields' career, because he's not coming back to Pittsburgh next year, would be for him to not step back on the field for the rest of this season and let those first 6 games be his resume. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of teams out there that just seeing that would gladly beat the door down for him. And so I feel like he's also putting like his career on the line a little bit every game coming out and, doing this, playing this way. And so, I admire it. I like it. Let's see. Wild Herb says, all now understand the viral quarterback spiral. Tomlin dispensing Fields and now sitting Russ mid-game. A la Pickett, Mason, Mitch. Both Russ and Fields are one and done. No re-sign. 2 quarterbacks, no quarterback. I don't think so.
I disagree. I like Leanne's point. I think this is unique. It could be special if they use it correctly and don't have penalties every time Justin Fields comes on the field.
Yeah.
But this is something that they could build on for sure.
Yeah, I think it is too. And like I said, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that we'll be lucky enough to have it next year again. I don't think that that's reasonable, but we've got, the rest of this season, and that's all you can plan for. And I think we could do something really awesome with it. All right, guys. Any final thoughts? Any last words?
Yeah, the one thing with this whole 2 quarterback thing is it leaves it murky. And we do not want to go into this offseason. If this ends in a Super Bowl, we don't care if it's murky. This ends in an early playoff exit, and murky is not good, because then we've got to flip a coin and decide who's who and who we're going to pay, who we're not going to pay. And we kind of talked about this on the Pick podcast the other night. Start embracing the idea that they both walk, and we end up with Daniel Jones.
Ugh.
They do like Daniel Jones. Well, that's what we've heard. Rumor has it they like. I don't know if that's actually true.
I would not.
I don't think it's that murky, Bob. I think unless Russell Wilson craters, they're going to try to re-sign him. They want him to be the starter.
I don't think it's murky in the slightest. I think
I'm not crazy about that.
And you'll bring Fields in. And I honestly hope that Fields was going to do something to make himself stand out, so he would be the future of this team because of his age and his athletic ability. But if that, I don't think that there's any murk. I think it's Wilson's job.
I think this is why the Steelers also specifically cut contracts and not kind of talk off at a certain point in the season, because you focus on winning. And so while, yes, we are thinking about it, and there are specific people in the front office whose jobs are to think about that, I believe the culture is there for a reason, that you're thinking about winning this season. We'll deal with that afterwards. And if either of the quarterbacks bring up that issue, then we'll deal with that when it comes up. But I like what you said, Leanne. They both seem like they want to win. And if it's as a tandem, even better. Great point. I like that.
Do you want to maybe win next year, or do you want to win for a decade? That's the question.
Yeah. Is Justin Fields really that guy to win with a decade? I don't know.
Jones.
We don't know, but we know that a 37-year-old quarterback is not going to win.
No, he's not. He's not a decade quarterback, but is he the guy that can get us through till you can figure out something else? Because who else is out there?
There's a very short window with Cam and TJ and Minka in their primes.
And so maybe you've got Wilson matches that window for a period of time and gives us that chance. Do you know what I mean? He's got the experience, because we bring in Daniel Jones. We're not going to win a Super Bowl with him during TJ and Cam's window.
So let TJ retire, let Cam retire, and then empty nest syndrome, and we'll bring in a new guy.
That's just another way of kicking the can, like they did this year.
That's part of football. That's part of what you do every year, is kick the can. You never have. I mean, to have the full complement of everybody be amazing is hard to do. You're always kicking the can somewhere.
But that's not how the Steelers typically do business. So are we saying this is a complete paradigm shift, where now the Steelers are only going to be in
it is because
now mode with an old quarterback?
They missed so badly on Kenny. Kenny Pickett was the answer, their answer, and it flopped. So now they had to change gears midstream.
Yeah, you essentially lost that draft pick. You flushed it right down the toilet. Do you know what I mean? So you do have to adjust, but it's no different than what we did with Bennett quarterback there at the end. I mean,
well, the difference was we had Ben his whole career.
Understood, but I don't think anybody thought we were getting to the Super Bowl with that terrible offensive line and Ben Roethlisberger hanging on by a thread.
I think 2020 people thought we were going to the Super Bowl.
2020 maybe.
I didn't.
I didn't think so.
And they did this before with Tommy Maddox too. Don't forget, they tried to shortcut it with Tommy Maddox and see if they could win some playoff games with him, and it didn't work out. So it's not completely.
They did win a playoff game with them.
They did,
and I gotta say that to me, that's the weirdest feeling Steelers era ever. The Tommy Gun era to me doesn't feel like the Steelers. It felt like another team came in for a year or two, and then
he played pretty well at times. He wasn't. He wasn't terrible.
But it didn't feel like the Steelers. It felt like I was
Tommy
watching
had
another
the greatest
team in the Steeler uniforms.
I will say this till the day I die. Tommy had the greatest single playoff game victory.
That Cleveland game was beautiful.
That Cleveland game was awesome.
I was at that game. That was a good game. That was a good game.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that lots of teams have won Super Bowls with quarterbacks that, when you hear their name later, you think he won a Super Bowl. Do you know what I mean? I think there's been plenty of those teams. Who? Trent
Trent
Dilfer.
Dilfer.
25
There
years
you
ago.
go.
25 years ago, that was true. It's not true
Yeah.
anymore. If your name ain't Mahomes or Brady, you haven't won Super Bowls in a long time.
But we haven't had players that are like that. That's new to football. Like these guys that are like Brady and Mahomes that are. I mean, it's just a different level. It's just a different level.
Yeah, since 2005, there was a stat for a while that if your name wasn't Brady, Manning, or Roethlisberger, you didn't win a Super Bowl.
Sure.
I mean, it's been kind of the paradigm for 20 years. You don't have a quarterback.
That's
don't
recent
win.
in football history.
Yeah, 20 years is 2 decades. That's more than just the last 3 or 4 years.
That's been my point with Tomlin and the Steelers. They're trying to cheat the system and win with a great defense and a great running game and just an okay quarterback. And I'm not sure you can do that.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean,
Yep,
this is the year.
That's a very good
We'll
point.
find out.
This is the
point, John.
year.
John says that we put ourselves 3 to 4 years behind by drafting Pickett and losing
At least.
him. Yeah.
At least.
Because
I'd agree.
yeah, we don't know what players we brought in to try and build a Pickett system or whatever like that, or the Matt Canada guys. Or it's the Matt Canada. 2 guys that set you back. We're still recovering from. So
That was probably the worst offseason in Steeler history, right? Drafting a terrible quarterback and picking the worst offensive coordinator possible. I mean, he's not even going to sniff a college job ever again, never mind a pro job. Matt Canada was a historically bad choice.
Yeah, that was bad. All right, guys. Any final thoughts before we wrap up for today? Put a nail in the coffin of the Browns until next time.
Let's finish this week. Let's finish this week and move on.
We're looking ahead to the Bengals, which we'll be back to talk about.
It's a huge game. They have to
After
win that game.
Thanksgiving. We usually do our preview show on Thursday, but we're going to let you all eat your turkey in peace without having to look at our faces. So we will be on sometime on Friday doing our show. We still have to nail down the time, but we'll be posting that on our Twitter page as soon as we decide. You guys are doing your pick show on Wednesday night. Is that correct?
Wednesday night. Yep.
Wednesday night at 6:30?
8:15.
8:15.
Oh, 8:15?
Wednesday night
Okay.
at 8:15 for their legendary picks. If you guys want to tune in and listen to that. If you've been listening tonight and joining in, John and even Zach's dad, we really appreciate all the comments and contributions from everybody except for David, who didn't bother to come join us tonight. We really do appreciate all the comments. You can go follow us on social media. You'll see all our handles up there by our names. You can also follow the Steelers Sanctuary page and the Steelers Sanctuary podcast page on Twitter or X. And we look forward to hearing from you. If you're watching this show after the fact, once it was already recorded, please still drop us a note, drop us a comment, let us know what you think. We want to hear what your good, bad, and ugly is, so let us know that. And we will see you later this week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.